Thank you very much, Bruce. Good afternoon, everyone. I am happy to be here today to announce that New Brunswick is one of the very first provinces to sign an agreement with the federal government on one project, one review. It sets out how we're going to collaborate and coordinate our environmental impact assessment and our reviews. Cette entente précise exactement comment nous allons collaborer pour les examens d'évaluation d'impact environnemental. This is going to give major project proponents the clear direction they need and remove duplication without weakening the strength or integrity of our environmental impact process. We are committed to protecting New Brunswick's beautiful landscapes, from our forests to our lakes to our beaches and oceans and streams and all of the places that New Brunswickers love and value. Our environmental impact assessment process is rigorous and well-established. It's robust and it's flexible enough to deal with a wide variety of complex issues. We're pleased that the federal government has recognized the robustness of our province and has joined with us to make sure that we reduce this duplication and redundancy to ensure a coordinated process. Nos partenaires fédéraux sont reconnaissants de la solidité de la processus ici avec notre EIE. Ce processus demeurera exhaustif, fondé sur les données probantes, puis guidé par un comité d'examen des experts composé d'organismes locaux, provinciaux et fédéraux. Veillant à ce que les questions et commentaires en concernant les grands projets soient bien étudiés avant toute la décision finale. Our process will continue to be thorough, evidence-based, and guided by an expert review panel consisting of local, provincial, and federal agencies, ensuring that questions and feedback on major projects are all addressed before final decisions are made. We're committed to working closely with our federal partners and our local partners to meet both regulators' requirements and to deliver on the goal of one project, one review. Nous engageons à collaborer ensemble étroitement avec nos partenaires pour répondre aux exigences des deux instances réglementaires et de réaliser l'objectif de un projet, une seule évaluation. The federal government has committed to continue providing participant funding to First Nations who want to be involved in these important reviews. Protecting the environment remains the objective, and through aligned federal and provincial environmental impact assessment processes, while maintaining our robust environmental protections, First Nations participation, and public engagement, we are going to make this happen in a way that responds to the times that we are in. We're proud of the modern partnerships and transparent partnership that we're building. Working together, we can do big things here in New Brunswick. Nous sommes vraiment fiers de nos partenariats et de la transparence. C'est quelque chose de moderne que nous bâtissons ensemble et je suis certain que nous pouvons accomplir des grandes choses positives pour le Nouveau-Brunswick ensemble, en protégeant notre environnement, en faire bouger des projets majeurs d'une façon coordonnée, d'une façon que les Néo-Brunswickois vont recevoir les bénéfices et vont être protégés tout au long de la système. I'll now turn it over to Minister LeBlanc for his comments.
So, Premier, thank you. Mon collègue, le ministre LePage, my colleague and my friend, David Miles. David, I was thinking this is the first time you and I have been together at a news conference. We were with our boss at the Modular Home Factory, but to be here with you, I admire David as a Juno Award-winning musician, artist, and now I get to work with him every day in the House of Commons where he represents this great community where I lived for 3 years. So I'm so happy, David, to be here with you as well. Et comme la Première ministre a dit, moi je suis très heureux de souligner la conclusion d'une entente de coopération entre nos deux gouvernements sur les enjeux d'évaluation environnementale. Global trade is evolving and Canada is taking decisive action to not only respond to the hinge moment in which we find ourselves, but to strengthen Canada's economy in every part of the country as well. Today's announcement is a testament to Premier Holt's leadership, to the leadership of her government in responding to this fundamental economic shift. And I want to thank her and her colleagues for being the first government to sign this cooperation agreement since we launched negotiations in this regard last June after the First Minister's meeting. As of today, when a major project in New Brunswick requires a federal and provincial assessment, there will be no more duplication between processes. Grâce à cet accord, les évaluations environnementales au Nouveau-Brunswick se feront dans un réel esprit de collaboration. Cela nous permettra d'éliminer, comme la première ministre a dit, les dédoublements, tout en maintien, et je pense que c'est important de le souligner comme Mme Holt l'a fait, tout en maintenant nos normes environnementales robustes et nos obligations, évidemment, envers les communautés autochtones concernées. En renforçant notre collaboration, nous envoyons un message clair à ceux qui aimeraient investir au Nouveau-Brunswick. Vous bénéficierez d'un processus d'évaluation plus clair, plus prévisible et plus rapide aussi. We know that agreements like this work. The fact that British Columbia has had a cooperation agreement in place since 2019 has enabled most projects there to benefit from a single harmonized environmental assessment. And British Columbia's ability to attract large-scale investment and grow its economy, I think in many ways should be the envy of other parts of the country. And to some extent, I know the Premier and I have heard this from her colleague, Premier Eby, the ability to have a coherent process to examine these kind of projects is part of the solution. So once again, Premier, thanks for your leadership. Thanks for stepping up for our province, but also for stepping up across the country. I've had the chance to see our Premier, my Premier, at First Minister's meetings in other fora across the country, and your leadership across the Federation, I think, is something that makes all of us proud, makes me proud as a New Brunswicker. So thank you once again, Premier Holt, for stepping up.
Thanks, Minister. Turn it over to Minister LePage.
Merci, Ministre LeBlanc. Premièrement, merci beaucoup à la Première ministre. Et je pense que vous avez entièrement raison, le ministre LeBlanc. Lorsque vous parlez de leadership et lorsque vous parlez de transparence, on a la preuve vivante entre nous deux. Et je pense que c'est un plaisir de travailler avec cette personne de leadership qui est la Première ministre Susan Holt. Et spécifiquement, dans le processus d'études d'impact environnemental, et lorsqu'on parle d'environnement, autour de la table, je peux vous dire que souvent, on est sur la même vision, on a une cohérence de travailler ensemble. Je tiens à souligner que notre province dispose d'un processus d'études d'impact environnemental solide et adaptable, mais il est conçu pour traiter des questions complexes. La protection de l'environnement est importante pour notre gouvernement. Il s'agit d'un effort collaboratif et chacun a un rôle à jouer. Le processus est très rigoureux. C'est le privilège d'être passé troisième, tout a été déjà dit, mais c'est fondé sur la science. Un comité de révision technique composé d'experts examine chaque projet afin d'évaluer des répercussions potentielles sur l'environnement et s'assure que les questions et les préoccupations pertinentes sont prises en compte avant que toute décision soit prise. Experts from local, provincial, and federal agencies sit on the committee, and their crucial role will not change under this agreement. Protecting the environment was, is, and will always be a priority. This government maintains our commitment to environmental protection, engagement and First Nation participation, and public involvement. It should also provide more clarity to proponents before and during the EIA process. By working together, sharing our knowledge, resources, and responsibilities, trusting each other, lasting change is created that benefits everyone. Merci tout le monde et c'est toujours un plaisir d'accueillir le ministre LeBlanc dans notre province et chez eux. Mais d'être assis aux côtés de lui pour une annonce, c'est plaisant de voir autant de monde devant aussi. Merci d'être là.
Merci. Je tiens à remercier tous nos invités. I'd like to thank all our podium speakers. We'll now proceed with questions from members of the media. We do have a limited time for questions, so each reporter will have one question and the quickest follow-up. You have the right to pose your question in the official language of your choice. Just to let you know, I will be alternating between members of the media who are present in the room and those online. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Notre temps pour les questions est limité. Alors, je vais alterner entre les différents médias. Chaque journaliste aura le droit à une question et un suivi rapide. Vous avez le droit de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Laura Brown, CTV.
I guess I'm wondering, Minister LeBlanc or Premier, when I think about the Sissenbrook Mine project, it just received its extension for a second time. I'm wondering if it had this process, like, do you feel like there would be more oversight if this, or was there even duplication there? Could we have seen that project move forward quicker had this been in place, I guess?
That's a good question, Laura. I think that process went through, that project went through a comprehensive EIA process, and both the provincial and the federal regulatory assessment process separately. So there was some duplication of effort, duplication of submission of information and evaluation that happened. But the Sisson project didn't pause because of that process. It paused because of market conditions and the way that China controls the price. So I think it's more important to think about the next project, because we have a number of critical mineral projects that we're looking to advance, and we have to time them properly because of market conditions, the way prices move, the way offtake agreements are being set up with people who need these critical minerals. We need to give proponents a sense of certainty on the timeline, and we need to be efficient because there were some things that proponents were having to do provincially and then do federally, and now we're going to meet those same standards, those same regulatory requirements with a harmonized and coordinated review process. So it's more efficient, and we're not going to waste anybody's time or energy while still upholding the most robust standards that our EIA process has in place.
And I guess on that, I wondered if for people who might look at this and say, oh, well, wait, we like two sets of eyes more than one. What would you say to maybe environmentalists who might be concerned that the scrutiny isn't there anymore? Yeah,
I appreciate that perspective, that there's lots of reasons why you measure twice and cut once. And thankfully, the process that New Brunswick has in place includes federal eyes and agencies, provincial organizations, local organizations, multiple people going over the data and the submissions, asking questions. So it's not just two sets of eyes, it's actually dozens and dozens of sets of eyes evaluating these projects. And so we are confident that their process is robust. We really appreciate that the federal government has recognized the quality and the strength of the process here in New Brunswick. I think it's one of the reasons why we're the first province to get the opportunity to coordinate and offer this one project, one review to the folks that are interested in investing in New Brunswick. But I want to let folks know there were going to be many eyes, and the same level of stringency and requirement through these processes as we've coordinated the timelines and the steps.
If I can, just the Premier's right. I think one has to be careful not to assume because we've signed a cooperation agreement, we're harmonizing a number of processes. The Government of Canada will rely on the good work in many cases that the province has been doing for a long time. In certain other spheres, the Government of Canada has expertise. If you think of the Fisheries Act or migratory birds, these are complex evaluations. You said it, Premier, in your opening comment. It starts by trusting one another. We trust the New Brunswick government and the scientists and the people that work on these evaluations to do good work. The Government of Canada also has significant capacity as well. But the same number of eyes, to go back to your analogy, can look at a particular review at the same time. It doesn't have to be sequential. So one of the challenges was Fisheries and Oceans would finish its work and forward it to Gilles' department. And then they would have a few questions, and Environment Canada would check, and then somebody would go. So that's where proponents and people understandably felt a sense that perhaps it wasn't as efficient as it might be. But it can be more efficient and more collaborative, but every bit as effective and rigorous. So it's not an either-or choice, in our view, or we wouldn't have agreed, and I can't imagine the provincial government would have agreed either. This is about saying to people, the next Sisson project, and the Premier's absolutely right, New Brunswick is well poised to be a Canadian powerhouse in many of these exciting nation-building projects. The next project proponent will benefit from more reliable timelines, expedited collaborative processes, but no less rigor or no less work to determine if, in fact, the environmental assessment has merit.
Thank you. We'll now go online to Emily Barron-Kadloff of the Canadian Press. Emily?
Hi there. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do have a question again on the Sisson mine. Given that, environmentalists said that some of the conditions that were set 10 years ago were weak back then and by now are out of date, is there going to be any overall reassessment of the environmental protections or anything else that New Brunswick is going to require to strengthen the environmental protections that they currently have, considering that the process is now being combined?
Thanks for the question, Emily. That's exactly what's happening right now. There are a number of conditions that are in place, both with the First Nations and the agreements that have been struck there, as well as coming out of the comprehensive environmental impact review that was done. And we're looking to bring those up to 2025. There's new technologies, there's new learning and knowledge out there. And so we're working in partnership with the proponents to make sure that this is going to be the best developed mine that Canada has ever seen, with the highest environmental standards and the most current technologies deployed to ensure the protection of New Brunswick's resources and environments while getting the benefit of these particularly critical minerals and tungsten and molybdenum in a way that's going to mean good paying jobs for New Brunswickers, that's going to mean revenues and royalties for our province that we can invest into our healthcare and education systems. So we are going through that, and even in the conversations with Woodstock and the Holistic Way, looking to modernize and update some of those agreements to today's standards and expectations.
Do you have a specific example of anything that might go in the expectation or agreement today that wasn't in 2015?
Well, there's things like having the conversation about taking a royalty regime and switching it to an equity relationship. Those are conversations that are happening with the First Nations communities around and involved. We're looking at some of the newer tailings pond technologies and processes to see if new things that have been developed over the last 10 years can be applied to this project. So those are a couple examples for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Silas Brown, CBC.
Thanks, Bruce. Just looking to try and understand the nuts and bolts here. So is New Brunswick going to be taking the lead with their EIA process, and then the federal government will then fill in any gaps that New Brunswick, their EIA process maybe wouldn't cover, that a federal EIA process wouldn't cover? It's all good to say you're avoiding duplication, but like, how's this actually going to work once we see this applied?
Interestingly, if we look back historically, I think there were 9 projects that went through federal review, and all of the rest were covered by provincial impact assessments. And so we're talking the big and complex projects that are going to get this harmonized treatment. But the provincial government is going to take the lead because we've established, and the federal government has confirmed, that we have a process that is rigorous and robust and flexible, and that they have coordinated and integrated into that. So there will be instances where, as the minister capably pointed out, some of the federal agencies are the lead on particular files. So if we talk about oceans and fishery, it's DFO that is the lead on that subject area, but it's going to be integrated into one timeline, one review process. And so depending on where the expertise lies, it's not going to be, we do our thing and finish it and hand off to you do yours. It's one project, one timeline, people doing their work concurrently and in an integrated way, sometimes using federal expertise, and oftentimes with the provincial group doing the lead.
I think if the Premier said it well, there's the vast majority of the projects that New Brunswickers are imagining are properly governed by robust provincial legislation. But when you get near tidal water, when you are dealing with potential species at risk, migratory birds, there's a series of areas where federal jurisdiction is triggered. And those are the cases where sometimes you had sequential stuff being done where it could be done at the same time. You had people waiting to transfer data. So what this does is set up a process, the province leading it, where everybody agrees on these are the things that we're going to look at together, and everybody leans in to help one another arrive at an expeditious conclusion. But the constitutional responsibility for the Government of Canada isn't abridged or diminished. It's just exercised in a collaborative way with the provincial constitutional responsibility, so that these big projects can be done more coherently.
I'd like to hear from you both as well on the HST agreement that you seem to have reached. What's that going to look like? Is that a transfer of that money? Is it, some sort of agreement to allocate those funds somewhere on a joint project? Any details that both of you could share would be appreciated.
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Well, so Christmas is coming. Everybody is looking forward to getting interesting Christmas presents. We have said across the country that the decision made over a year ago, around the HST obviously had direct fiscal impacts in provinces that have a harmonized sales tax. We also said we're not compensating provinces, we're not writing a check for the amount, but we're always looking with every province, and not only those that have harmonized sales tax, for ways we can support joint initiatives. So I'm very confident that the Premier's understandable concern about what that meant to her fiscal framework will be addressed in the fullness of various arrangements that the Government of Canada can make with provinces.
Alex Villeneuve, Radio Canada. Oh, sorry.
Well, New Brunswickers can be reassured to know that we're going to be kept whole, and it's positive for New Brunswick.
Alex Villeneuve, Radio Canada.
Merci. Pour revenir aux évaluations, là, j'aimerais clarifier un peu. Là, s'il y a un projet, je comprends qu'on va présumer d'abord que c'est le Nouveau-Brunswick qui va prendre le lead. Mais s'il y a un potentiel impact, puis j'aimerais vous entendre, vous, M. Lepage, s'il y a un potentiel impact d'un projet sur, par exemple, le bar rayé, la baleine noire, un phoque, une espèce marine, est-ce que je comprends que votre ministère n'a toujours pas ses ressources sur cette expertise-là? Donc, comment est-ce qu'on va s'assurer que la coordination ne ralentit pas puis que ça ne devienne pas une deuxième étude qui pourrait un peu contrebalancer l'esprit de l'entente?
Merci pour la question, mais je pense que c'est simple. L'objectif derrière ce processus ici est aussi de travailler avec le proposeur du projet avant qu'il soumette sa demande officielle. Donc, on peut déjà prévoir les coûts à venir avant qu'ils arrivent. Et donc, là, à ce moment-là, si on a besoin d'une expertise fédérale, on va tendre la main, comme on le fait toujours tout de suite actuellement, sur le comité technique où les composantes fédérales sont là, et on va chercher l'expertise spécifique pour le projet qui est proposé. Donc, chaque projet a a son bassin d'experts qui est consulté pour chacun des cas. Et avec les exemples que tu as donnés, c'est clair et précis que dès le départ, on va s'en apercevoir que c'est pour le fédéral et on va faire appel à eux.
Monsieur LeBlanc, peut-être me parler aussi, là, je comprends en ce moment que peut-être on s'entend bien côté fédéral-provincial, là, mais si dans quelques années...
Déçoit? Vous êtes déçu de ça?
Non,
Voulez-vous
non,
des chicanes? Pas de député du Bloc québécois ici.
Est-ce qu'il pourrait y avoir, dans un avenir, à m'amener un moment où le fédéral dit l'utilisation de nos ressources ou, du moins, l'évaluation menée par le Nouveau-Brunswick ne nous satisfait plus? Dans un cas comme ça, comment est-ce que le fédéral, est-ce qu'on pourrait décider avec cette entente-là? Y a-t-il une porte qui est disponible pour dire Ottawa n'est pas satisfait de l'entente avec le Nouveau-Brunswick par rapport à un projet?
Bien, deux choses. Moi, ça fait longtemps assez que je fais la politique. Vous attendez sûrement que je ne vais pas répondre à une question hypothétique comme ça. Deuxièmement, moi, je ne suis pas pessimiste non plus. Vous avez beaucoup de bonne volonté. Vous avez un gouvernement, dans le gouvernement de Mme Holt, progressiste, engagé, rigoureux sur les questions environnementales, tout à fait ouvert à collaborer avec l'expertise que le gouvernement fédéral peut avoir dans des domaines précis. Moi, je ne peux pas imaginer un scénario aussi néfaste que vous avancez où on va rentrer dans un cul-de-sac et chercher des sorties de secours. C'est l'opposé. On va s'attacher nos ceintures, puis on va faire le voyage ensemble.
We'll go online. Maintenant en ligne, Alexandre Boudreau, l'Acadie Nouvelle.
Bonjour. J'aimerais savoir si ce nouveau processus-ci s'applique aussi à la centrale au gaz de Tantramar et si oui, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire pour le processus d'études environnementales qui est déjà en cours?
Le processus qui est déjà en cours est commencé et va continuer de la façon qu'il a été entamé. Je pense que déjà, on a la collaboration fédérale sur le comité technique et on va poursuivre ce partenariat-là avec le fédéral. Et tant et aussi longtemps que les conditions ne seront pas élaborées ou connues avec le proposeur du projet, à ce moment-ci, jusqu'à date, on n'a pas vu qu'on avait besoin de plus d'aide du fédéral qu'on l'a tout de suite.
D'accord, merci. Je veux aussi savoir pour le ministre LeBlanc, est-ce que, spécifiquement sur la mine Sisson, est-ce que vous allez instaurer un prix plancher pour les minéraux qui seront extraits là-bas? Puis, dans le fond, est-ce que vous allez subventionner le prix des minéraux? Et sinon, comment est-ce que le gouvernement fédéral va accélérer la création de cette mine-là?
Bien, vous avez posé trois questions. La deuxième, en ce qui a trait à des subventions, je ne pense pas qu'il y ait de question du gouvernement fédéral de subventionner le projet, mais vous avez soulevé la bonne question en ce qui a trait, votre première question, en ce qui a trait au prix plancher. En anglais, the Premier, Mme Holt avait référé, en anglais, it's an off-take agreement. Mais c'est ça, effectivement, qui s'assure que les Chinois ne peuvent pas diminuer le prix d'une commodité pour faire en sorte que, soudainement, les investisseurs privés qui ont bâti la mine se trouvent dans une situation financière qui est pas tenable. Ça, c'est exactement le genre de discussion que la compagnie Northcliffe, aussi the Todd Group, qui sont propriétaires de Northcliffe. Les propriétaires de la mine ont, avec le Bureau des projets nationaux, des projets majeurs, quand nous avons référé la mine Sisson, c'était précisément, et je me rappelle de mes conversations avec Mme Holt et avec David aussi, c'était précisément de trouver la bonne façon de s'assurer que ce genre d'enjeux financiers ne deviennent pas un empêchement pour développer la mine. Alors, l'objectif, c'est le Canada et nos alliés, comme la première ministre a dit, ont besoin de ces minéraux critiques. La géologie est faite, les questions environnementales sont largement faites. Il s'agit de les mettre à jour possiblement. Comme Mme Holt a dit, je suis entièrement d'accord avec elle, mais le Bureau des projets majeurs du gouvernement fédéral sera là pour travailler avec la compagnie en respectant les normes environnementaux que la province va élaborer, mais en s'assurant que ce genre d'enjeux financiers ne deviennent pas, comme il était dans le passé, l'empêchement pour la décision finale d'investir l'argent.
Johnny
Merci.
James, Global.
Good afternoon, Premier. This question is for you. I spoke with the Nashwaaksis Watershed Association very recently, and I asked for their comments on the Sisson Mine proposal. And their response to that was that tailing spawns in these types of mines, even in the best circumstances, are always prone to leaks. And they said it was in close enough proximity to the watershed that any leaks of that nature would devastate the ecosystem of that. And I don't know whether this announcement today will quell those concerns of theirs. So what do you say to their concerns there?
Well, the folks at the Nashwaak Watershed Association do incredible work, largely by volunteers and some really dedicated staff to protect the Nashwaak, that is a critical waterway in New Brunswick for a whole variety of different wildlife and others, as well as recreational and historical and beyond. So I really appreciate that they are out there advocating for the protection of this critical waterway and making sure that we are deploying the highest standards, the latest technology, the strongest solutions to make sure that this will be the mine where the tailings pond, if that's the solution that's deployed, does not leak and devastate that critical environmental resource. The announcement today doesn't actually have bearing on the Sisson project because it has been through federal and provincial environmental impact assessments and comprehensive reviews already. Conditions are in place that must be met, but the announcement today of our coordinated move to a one project, one review will impact future projects like Sisson as we pursue additional opportunities to realize the benefits of the resources we have here in New Brunswick in Canada's interest and in the interests of our partners around the world.
My follow-up to that is just like how much have they been like involved in like have associations like the Nashwaak or Conservation Council of New Brunswick, how much have they been involved along the talks with the Sisson project, and how much can they expect more going forward?
They were significantly involved in the process. As I mentioned, it was a comprehensive EIA review, so conducted over many years some time ago. And now that it looks like the project is ready to move because we have the conditions in place to get this critical mineral for Canada's protection and defense and for our energy interests and security, getting it developed. We are re-engaging with the neighboring communities, with the environmental associations, restarting the engagement with the Woodstock First Nation and the Wolastoqey and the Mi'kmaq, and all of those, the neighboring communities met recently with members of Gilles' team and the Regional Service Commission because we're ready to realize this benefit for New Brunswickers, not only for our economy, but for our collective benefit. And so organizations like the Nashwaak Watershed will be involved, will be hearing from them, sharing information with them, and continuing to do this work collaboratively.
Thank you. John Chillebeck, Post Media.
Yes. Oh, thank you. You've talked about the fact that, you know, Sisson went through this process a long time ago. It won't affect that. What future projects are you hoping this will go through? I mean, what are we talking about here?
That's a good question. I don't know if Gilles has a list in front of him, but certainly from a mining perspective, we're looking at Mount Pleasant, at Lake George. We have some more review to do up in the Caribou mine. Those are just some, but we also know that with a number of our energy projects, you'll recall that we've tendered for a significant amount of wind development. And so anywhere that folks that have won those initial awards to develop the 450 megawatts of wind in partnership with Indigenous proponents, where those are sited and how those go about getting developed will require EIA processes and sometimes have impact on things that the federal government has jurisdiction over. So we'll coordinate for the benefit of the advancement of those kind of renewable energy projects. There's a number of them coming forward in New Brunswick in the year ahead.
I think of also, if I can, Premier, major port expansions. If you're going to do significant
Did I hear just
infrastructure.
that you say you're committed to the 2 port projects? Is that what I just want to get that
I was
on
just
record?
about to mention the 2. I hope I get the right 2, Susan.
Me
You're
too.
talking about the Kokang Marina and the Rishi-Bhaktu Wharf. Had you, but if you think about major port projects that we want to do in the interest of Canada's economy, it's obviously the Port of St. John, it's Belledune, and there are other smaller ones. Those are the 2 big trade-related infrastructure investments. There's private capital interested in that. I think that you've just heard the Premier say that she'd like to invest a lot of provincial money in those 2 ports as well. But those, you want concrete examples. You start excavating around a port, you build giant container terminals next to tidewater. You can see a perfect example where we'd want to do the rigorous environmental assessments efficiently under this new process. So those would be, to add to the Premier's list, other examples. We didn't talk about the Romeo LeBlanc Airport in Moncton either, Susan.
Well, one of the key stuff, if you
Bingo
permit,
card,
it's
yeah.
also to put the right players at the right place at the right time. So when we do need, this agreement actually reinforces any EIA process that we're going to do, whether it's a large project or a small project. This is a collaboration, a partnership agreement that we're signing with the feds to help us out with our EIA process, to make sure that we're up to date with every new technology, new information that is out there to protect the environment and to protect New Brunswickers.
MTI, which represents 8 of 9 Mi'kmaq communities in New Brunswick, they don't like this process, and they've said that they feel it won't be as rigorous environmentally, and they also want to be more engaged in the process, which they had been somewhat under the federal EIA process. So I noticed they're not part of that local, provincial, federal expert committee. Why is that?
I think as the minister has described, those expert committees are struck uniquely per project. So different representatives depending on the project and whose interests and whose territories are implicated. But we actually would like MTI to be more involved in not just the consultation and communications, but some of the technical review going forward, because as I'm sure you can appreciate, we have been rebuilding relationships with First Nations in this province over the last year. We just met with the folks from MTI and all of the chiefs of the First Nations across New Brunswick was it, I think, a week or 2 ago, talking about the projects that we're doing together, talking about the roles that people want to play. So we share their desire to have them more involved, and they now have a provincial government that is that's keen to partner with them and leverage their expertise on the technical review side of our environmental impact assessments.
And the Premier said it very well in terms of her government's important engagement, but the federal government will also, for exactly the same reasons that the Premier outlined, be interested in figuring out ways that we can ensure their participation in these technical processes that take place around particular potential projects, and we're actually going to make funding available for them, MTI and other Indigenous groups, to be able to fully participate. So there's federal money attached to their participation as a way of ensuring that they can be full participants.
Minister LeBlanc, the gentleman behind me was wondering if you could repeat your comments on the price flooring in English.
Jacques?
He who shall not be named.
It's called an offtake agreement. Yeah. So one of Jacques didn't want to ask a question directly, or?
Thought we were out of time, but go ahead.
Oh, you tried to cut the time by. Oh, normally, Jacques, in Ottawa, somebody just yells in English, please, en anglais. So that's the way to do it. There's more yelling that goes on. More yelling that goes on in our news conferences. The Premier said it well. The Sisson project ran into headwind and delay, not because of environmental approvals that were properly given by the relevant provincial and federal authorities, albeit 10 years ago, interested in seeing how they can be updated. So the Premier said that very well. It became a global challenge around the commodity price of tungsten. China has a dominant position in the global marketplace for this critical mineral. That's not in Canada's national security interest to be dependent on other countries in a disproportionate way. And you can imagine that's also true for allies in Europe, in the United States, other allies of Canada. So how fortunate that New Brunswick has a project largely ready to go. The geology is done. The challenge is, and this is where our major projects office is working directly with the proponent, with Northcliffe Resources and the Todd Group from New Zealand who own Northcliffe, to figure out the right series of financial instruments necessary to allow an investment decision of hundreds of millions of dollars of private capital to begin, as the Premier said, putting the mine into construction. Understandably, the shareholders of these companies want the right series of assurances, reliable assurances, that China's not simply going to cut the price once the mine goes into production to make sure that it then is no longer viable. In some cases, they take the form of offtake agreements. There's a series of other options that the Major Projects Office will recommend to the Government of Canada. I would be the minister responsible for the Major Projects Office. So I'll ensure that that work is done expeditiously. They will develop options for the Government of Canada with the main objective of seeing that mine into production as quickly as possible in the right way, with all of the right conditions in place. And I've committed to the Premier that we will obviously share with her and her government those options as we get the right financial instruments to lead to that final investment decision that a private company would make, which means thousands of jobs and millions of dollars of investment in our province over many years.
Thank you. Last set of questions. We're going to go to David Gordon Coach, MB Media Co-op.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, David.
Great. Okay, a bit of a provocative question. To some critics, this kind of measure will look like an attempt to use the trade war as a pretext to push through policies that, will increase corporate power, an example of what is sometimes called disaster capitalism. Your response, Premier Holt and Minister LeBlanc.
Our announcement today is about not wasting a single tax dollar and making sure that we have eliminated redundancy and duplication. We've been efficient in our efforts. We've coordinated our timelines and our teams so that we have one project going through one clear and robust review that leverages the strengths and benefits of the federal government's expertise, the provincial government's expertise, local and Indigenous expertise, so that we can move major projects forward in a way that protects and benefits New Brunswick and Canada. That's what today's announcement is about.
Question?
Mr. LeBlanc?
Well, so I obviously don't share the premise of your question, or the way you presented the question. I wouldn't agree with the premise. We ran an election campaign this year with a commitment to Canadians that we would get big projects done quickly. So sitting here with the Premier is an absolute continuation of the mandate Canadians gave the Carney government at the end of April. But it's also true that our economy is facing significant headwinds because of the application of U.S. tariffs on sectors of the economy that are critical to the economic prosperity of the country. So both of those things are true at the same time. It is true, then talk to people in the steel, the automobile, the aluminum, the softwood lumber industry, certain mineral industries. Talk to other business people that are hesitating to make investment decisions while there is such uncertainty around U.S. tariff and trade practices. So I think the government has a responsibility to be thoughtful and responsible in finding economic opportunities for New Brunswickers and for Canadians that may very well be in a tenuous economic circumstance and benefit from hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in a great critical mineral project in New Brunswick on world-class environmental standards. if you're working in one of those industries and one of those sectors today, to suddenly see hiring job fairs where hundreds of people will be hired in good-paying, long-term jobs is, I think, a very responsible thing for governments to look at.
Mr. Coach, a quick follow-up.
Just, the number of companies that have staked claims around the site of the proposed Sisson mine in recent weeks and months, is multiplied. I think for the Premier, do you believe this shows that your, promotion of the mining sector is working?
We're certainly seeing a significant amount of interest from all over the world in the resources that New Brunswick has here that are world-class and that are in high demand because of, as I said, their application in defense solutions, in green energy solutions, in solar panels, and wind turbines, and batteries, and touchscreens. So we are absolutely seeing that interest. And look, full credit to Minister Herron, who has been out there making people and investors aware of the resources that New Brunswick has that are ripe for development, while Minister LePage's incredible team is making sure that they have the resources to execute the most robust environmental impact assessments possible, that in a timely way, so that New Brunswickers can get the benefit of the jobs, the investment, the activity, and what that means for our ability to deliver services to them. So it is really exciting, and we're pleased that the world is taking notice of what New Brunswick has to offer and our expertise in mining and geology and environmental engineering, built from some of the best schools in the world that do this. I think it's a sign that that New Brunswick has a lot to offer Canada and the world at this moment.
Thank you. Before we close, I'd like to turn it to the Premier. Le dernier mot, Madame Première Ministre.
Thank you very much. Ben, premièrement, merci tout le monde pour être là. Je sais qu'on est la dernière semaine et vous êtes ici en beaucoup de nombre et vous autres en ligne aussi. C'est mon plaisir d'accueillir le ministre LeBlanc ici à Fredericton et j'apprécie énormément le partenariat qu'on a être promoteur pour le Nouveau-Brunswick en Ottawa, autour du monde et maintenant en avancer cette annonce. Merci aussi à David d'être un excellent représentant pour Fredericton, Lincoln. Did I get that right? Fredericton, Oromocto. Thank you. I've got provincial riding names in my head for Fredericton, Oromocto, and for always looking after the interests here and also being an excellent partner to work with. I want to take a minute to recognize Minister LePage and his team. There's members of the team that have worked very hard on this, some of whom are in the room and others maybe working hard back at their offices, but put in a lot of effort that I really appreciate. Et finalement, en terminant, je veux reconnaître que c'est peut-être la dernière fois qu'on va avoir Alex Villeneuve dans la salle médiatique. Alors, je veux lui mentionner puis le remercier pour son dernier moment dans cette salle. Peut-être pas pour toujours, mais nous sommes reconnaissants de votre travail et que vous êtes ici aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup, Alex. Ouais.
Joyeux Noël, Alex.
Oui, joyeux Noël. Merci tout le monde.
Voilà ce qui met à fin notre conférence de presse. That concludes today's news conference. Thank you.